Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Cynthia Miller and I've got a head start here because I forgot to hit the record button, but we don't have too much on the paper yet. We've got the template and then I started wetting the petals of the biggest flower and adding the color quinacridone pink. And I mixed it up with lots of water so it's very, very light, and I think that that's the message throughout this painting, is to keep the layers very, very light. When you think of spring blossoms and the plum and the cherry, it's almost like you can see through them. So that is the effect that we are trying to get here. What I've done is put the water on the petal almost to the pencil line. So you're leaving just a little rim of white around the outside of the petal. And by doing this, you'll find that it does look like it is see-through, and it'll look really light and airy. You won't probably notice this until we get the background done, but this is sort of the first step in helping to make these flowers and the petals look really light. So I'm just picking up a little bit in the center. I've pushed my strokes out from the center to the outside, and I've picked up a little bit of color there so that I can dab a little bit of yellow. So the yellow that I'm using, and you'll notice how it just sort of spreads nicely if your paper is still wet, and that's really what we want. We're trying to blend these colors on the petal. So the petals do take a little bit of working, and I started with a big flower because I wanted to sort of set the stage for the tone, the color, the shade of pink that I'm using, and adding the yellow. Now you'll notice that I'm pushing the strokes of the yellow out to the outside edges of the petals. It sort of gives it a star look. And then I'm putting on a very dark purpley sort of magenta color to really have an impact on the center of the flower. Now I've decided that I'm going to start on the other side of the page and work my way towards the right, because I don't want to drag my hands into the paint when I'm doing flowers close up. I probably should have started with these ones over here, but I wanted to just try the big one. So I'm just going to do the very same with all the petals, all the flowers. And you know, some of the flowers are facing a different way, so you want to keep that in mind. Just have a look at the shape of your petals, and it sort of helps to put that center in the middle. It makes them sort of pop and come alive, and it depends on which way that flower is facing that you will put the inside dark colors, just sort of make it look like it's either leaning one way or the other. And so I'm just pointing out a couple of places there on the flowers where you're going to want to leave a lot of white. Okay, so as I mentioned, just take the water out to barely touch, not even touching the pencil line. So you're going to leave that white rim around the outside of the petal, but you can also leave white on the insides of the petals, just sort of in strokes towards the outside of the petal. So you want to always have those strokes going out because the petals do have a line through them. So I'm just going to work through all of the blossoms, just sort of keeping this in mind, keeping the shade really, really light with addition of water. So I'm not taking the paint exactly from my palette. I'm mixing it with water first before I put it on my paper. I want it very light. And then there's a couple of buds there that are a little bit different. When we do the buds, you want to remember to sort of add layers. Just think about what a bud looks like, and it's layer upon layer of petals. So just working with the bud, building the layers, starting off with one coat and just adding another. And what I'm doing is keeping the light on the left side and adding the darker layers to the right side, as well as down around the stem of the bud. And when you're doing your petals and doing the stems, we'll do the stems next, just keep in mind wherever the petals meet the stem or the stem comes into the larger branch, those are where you're going to put more layers on. those are the natural areas where it's dark. So always remember, you want to have light and dark. Light is usually the top, dark is usually the bottom areas, but it just depends if there's shadows. So just keeping an eye on where you're building up the layers. You don't want to just build up the layers everywhere. You want to keep the layers building up on the lower part of the blossoms and the stems. So just doing the last flower here. I played with the flowers quite a bit, just adding the layers as they dried. Always adding that yellow shortly after the first coat of the pink so that it blends in, and then you continue to put coats of light pink on top of it. It really does look like it's on the center. And then I'm starting the second bud here. So this pattern was used last year in our class, and I thought, well, I'll just use it again and see how my painting skills have changed. And the first one was quite a small card, as you can see, but I think that I used more wet brush on dry paper because there's more hard lines. You can see with the close-up of the small card picture that there's more direct lines and divisions of colors, whereas the larger one I'm doing today is more blended, and I used water on the paper first so that it flows quite nicely when you put, it's a little bit bigger area, so when you put water on first, it does help to make the finish smooth and even. But both styles are very appealing to me. The third one that I did after I did this video was interestingly the best one, because I think that I had taken the best of both and tried to combine them, and just sort of kept a little closer eye on the tone and the shade of the colors. Whether it was really, really light or really, really pink, sort of candy pink or more rose pink or dusty rose pink, like all those pinks can go together, but you do have to watch those colors. Now here's a close-up of all the different shades that actually went into this artwork, and I think that was the thing that, in hindsight, not my favorite part of it. All the different pinks did not appeal to me in this fashion. When you look at the other artwork, it's sort of the same shade of pink, but different levels of light to darkness. So it works. I'm just pointing out, you can see where the white around the pencil line has quite a good design part of it, because it's going to leave it looking like it is light. I'm just pointing out a couple of petals where we're looking at them straight on, and so you want to have sort of shapes. You want to have white showing in the petals. You want to have them facing different angles and looking a little bit differently, and just always having those strokes coming through. So they're sort of a different style, each one of them. So it's sort of interesting to look at it with that perspective. But I think that was the challenge, is to have them all have the same style in one piece, so that it's appealing to the eye. It's not confusing, right? So just finishing up here with this flower. I can't really say I'm finishing up. I did play with them for some time, because you want the layers to dry in between what you're putting on. You don't want them to always blend. I did put some hard lines in there on dry paper and then add water. It just makes it a different effect doing these different things. So I'm just mixing up a green here for the stem. I did grays on the first one. It's more of a black gray color, but I wanted to put more green into it this time, especially around the base of the buds. So that is where I'm hoping to put more greens, and then just bringing more of a sort of mossy green, brownish tones into the rest of the stem and the branch. So again, just starting out really, really light with lots of water. Just keep adding the water until you have a really light color, and then just start and put one layer on at a time. And then The second layer will be a little bit of shading, third layer, fourth layer, fifth layer, just a little bit more shading all the time, paying attention to where you're putting that shading. The lower part of the stem, the lower part of the bud, the lower part of the branch, and letting it have its highlights on the top. You know, assuming that the sun is up in the top and the light's coming from above, and you're looking at it sort of face to face at eye level. So it took a while to just sort of go through and do the branch, do the stems, and just put on that first layer first. I did start to shade it there, but I think it's better to just do one layer at a time so it doesn't bloom. You don't want too much water on your paper when you're doing this. I didn't wet down the paper before I did the stem because it's a small area, so it's manageable. I don't really, have to worry too much about it flowing. I'm putting enough water on the paper with the color to let it flow on that dry paper. And I'm trying to keep the shades and the angles of the stem and the branch so that it works. It has to look consistent. It has to look the same shade from one side to the other. And I'll just continue to play with it, going from left to right now, just sort of taking my arm up out of the wet paint so that it doesn't make a mess there. But yeah, just sort of filling in between the lines of the branch with a little bit more green shade. So there I've got it filled in, and now I'm just going to continue to play with it a little bit, put layer upon layer, and bring out those knots, bring out the joints where the little twigs meet the branch, base of the buds. You can see where I'm putting that darker shades in, and it will look more realistic when you pay attention to where you're putting that dark coat in. It's not super dark, but you'll see there's a close-up. It sort of gives you an idea of not only the white on the edges of the petals, but the dark on the branches and around the bud stem. And so I just sort of go back to each flower now and just filling in the inside. When you put in darker colors in the center, it brings more depth, and you can start to sort of pull those strokes out, just tiny little strokes. And just bringing in some clean water now to start with the background. And you'll notice on this first artwork is that there's a very light blue around the flowers. That's what I'm pointing out here, is there is a light shade of blue along the stem. So that's what we're going to do first. Just put on a very light shade. We're going to put water on each section. We're going to do a section at a time. And what we're going to do is start with a good sized brush that will allow me to put lots of water on there and some pigment. And then I'm going to use my smaller brush to go in between the branches and the petals to spread that blue right up to the petals. So I'm just putting on clear water here, putting on the base, just doing one section at a time. And then I'm going to start to put on a really nice blue. This is the Fallow Blue. And again, it's very light. I mix lots of water with it. So it's just a light blue. We're just going to go along the branches, along the stems to put a very light color in there. And now I've picked up my smaller brush and keeping it very wet and just moving it around. And I am going right up to the pencil lines now, the outside pencil lines of the petals. And so I'm bringing the light blue right up to the stem, the branch, and the petals. And this is just going to give you a really nice base to start with, and then we'll put the more vivid, brighter blues further away from the branch. So again, just doing each section at a time, just putting some water on there first, and this is a little bit of blue in there as well. But you can really manipulate the watercolor when you've got lots of water between the branches there. So you see I've finished up on the left hand side, and now I'm adding some more water because I can just sort of finish up with that one corner and then just continue it out to the corner. And so I'm just adding some really vivid blues, a little bit of gray. I'm going to add a little bit of green, and just whatever background color you'd like to add. I think the blues really look nice with the pink. They give you a really nice spring look. It's sort of the blue skies above that this might remind you of. So I'm just going to continue to move that around. And I'm using a tissue too to sort of sop up little puddles and give it a little bit of a mottled look. You don't want the background to be too complicated, but you do want it to have some interest. So we're just using lots of water to be able to spread things around. And there I've added a little bit of green in there as well. So just being really vivid with those colors. And then I'm going to take my tissue and just, didn't really like it too dark right there, but I think I end up putting it back down there. So I'm just using a bit of tissue to pick up excess moisture. I like to have a little bit of texture in the background. And here I am adding the second layer of water now to the light blue layer. And this will be the darker, more vivid colors for the top portion of the print. So yeah, just adding the blue. You can see how it just runs really lovely, and just sort of mixing in that green with it. I really love these colors. It's almost, you could make anything with these colors and it would be a beautiful print. So the greens and the blues and the pinks, and just really replicate spring in my mind. Just keeping the outside dry. You don't want the paper to sop up that extra water. And there I put the darker color back in there. It just sort of seemed a little bit more fitting to bring that down. And so just play with it, whatever, it looks good to you. I think that you have to use your intuition, your creative eye to just sort of see how it looks. And I know the tissue brings really soft lines. If you've got a hard line and you don't like the way that it looks, but you don't want to continue making that hard line across your page, then just, sop it up with a little bit of paper, just a bit of tissue, and it will make it soft. So just adding a little bit more here, and I do play with it for a while just to give it some depth and shadow and interest. But that's pretty much it. It is ready for some sprinkles now. So when you do some sprinkles, I think it's a good idea to just practice a little bit first. You want to see how big they are. You want to direct them where you want them to go. I think I'm using purples and I use the pink as well as the purple here, and you can see where it's dotted on the wet blue. It spreads a little differently than putting it on the dry paper. So again, it gives a little bit of interest. It spreads a little bit more, and that's pretty much it. I'm really happy with the way these turned out. So I like the third one I did, so I'll share that as well. Have fun with your painting.